Also, we'll go to the other architect whose birthday is today, Giuseppe Terragni, a very important Italian architect who also died young, about the same age like Enric Miralles. So Giuseppe Terragni, 1904-1943. In fact, he died a little bit younger than Enric Miralles, but he was a significant presence in architecture, not just Italian. So Giuseppe Terragni was an Italian architect. You see, born April 18th, who worked primarily under the fascist regime of Benito Mussolini and pioneered the Italian modern movement under the rubric of Rationalism. His most famous work is the Casa del Fascio, built in Como, northern Italy, which was begun in 1932 and completed in 1936. It was built in accordance with the international style of architecture and frescoed by abstract artist Mario Radice. In 1938, at the behest of Mussolini's fascist government, Terragni designed the Danteum, an unbuilt monument to the Italian poet Dante Alighieri, structured around the formal divisions of his greatest work, the Divine Comedy. A beautiful project which was not built, but which renews my interest and my claim that metaphysics could save physics, that the metaphysical side of architecture and of life, if addressed, could actually have beneficial effects on the so-called normal life and on the so-called normal architecture. I don't think we reflect enough on the importance of metaphysics, even for the realm of physics, even in the realm of what architecture is supposed to do. This was the man, a handsome man coming from an affluent family, and until 39, when he died, he built some remarkable buildings. Here he is, you see, progettare la cultura. Are we reflecting enough on this? Of course not. That's why the interest in such presentations is still very, very low, because we don't believe that architecture is connected even with culture, which is totally wrong. To believe that it is not. It is part of culture, and if it's not, then it's not architecture. Anyway, fortunately, there are people like him who think otherwise. He was in a way, an avant-garde architect, and that's why perhaps Peter Eisenman loved him. I know he loves now Alberti and he loved Palladio, but he had a big interest in Giuseppe Terragni. And I remember attending a conference by Eisenman where he stated that he had a collection of the books, publications dealing with Terragni and so on. Some drawings. He drew well, and in an evocative way, he expressed the essence of a project, either in a sketch like here, or in a more elaborate way, like in this, the Danteum, and this for the Casa del Fascio in Como. He used perspective, of course, and today we have our renderings, digital renderings, which are different in a way than what we see here. But we cannot deny the skill of his drawing. Casa del Fascio. And it is amazing in a way that fascism encouraged in Italy a very modern, avant-garde almost architecture, as opposed to Germany. Mussolini and Hitler collaborated, but in the field of aesthetics, there was a big difference between Hitler's dreams and Mussolini's, I would say, more than tolerance for high modernity. You are going to see some very surprising things which were built during his, being in power. This is an albergo in Como, an early work. He just, you see, is nothing maybe glorious. He just, worked on these two floors here and brought some order or, a certain kind of modernity, if you want. A very early work. Giuseppe Terragni. Now, Novo Comum in Como, 1927-1929. This is a building which I also used images of, or an image of in the invitation I sent to 2,300 people, highly exuberant about this presentation, as you can see. Yeah, it kind of shows its age, but not totally correctly. I mean, would you think that this building is from 1927? Not necessarily, although it shows a little bit its age. Not as dramatically as the building on the right, which might even be younger, actually. I wonder what artists and architects saw in fascism, because they had some brilliant minds and great artists who, sympathized with it, and not just in Italy. How to explain that a brilliant mind like Heidegger was, positively inclined towards fascism? So was Knut Hamsun, the great Norwegian writer who even received the Nobel Prize for Literature, and he deserved it. What about Emil Nolde, the great painter? Also, sympathizing openly with fascism. I wonder, how come? Strange, probably had some, elements of seductiveness, fascism, that such diverse people, yes, were seduced by fascism. Some even died for. Anyway, Terragni was an excellent architect. Monumento ai caduti della Guerra Mondiale di Erba from 1926-1932, he built several monuments or commemorative structures, which are, I would say, very convincing as monuments. Maybe too convincing, so to speak. I mean, there is a level of rhetoric here which cannot be denied. And he even built, you'll see in a cemetery, the dealings he had with the commemoration are a little bit, there are traces of historicism here. He's not as modern as he is in some other kinds of structures. But I think it's important that an architect at that time addressed such a program, commemoration, having to do with memory, just like in the Danteum project, which you are going to see. Another monument, also in Como. This was actually built on graphic suggestions coming from Antonio Sant'Elia. Those graphic suggestions maybe were more than just suggestions, but the architect of the monument was Giuseppe Terragni. He was invited by Marinetti, the futurist poet, to commemorate in a way the memory of Antonio Sant'Elia and build this monument, and they did. It's an impressive monument. I think continues to have presence and a level of modernity and dignity even, you know, we just compare this building with this building. So Santelia, Marinetti, Prampolini, Attilio and Giuseppe Terragni, they were united in creating this monument. Well, Santelia was dead, but you see here the drawing of Santelia, and you see here the building as it was built by Giuseppe Terragni. And it moves me, this collaboration over time, you know. In a way, a good artist never dies, you know. So he died in 1914, but in 1933, Giuseppe Terragni built this monument based on the drawing by Antonio Santelia. So here is the drawing by Antonio Santelia, who died at 28, who died without dying. And that's why I keep telling the students, create, present to the world your vision, you know, what you feel, what you dream, and you don't know. We are not responsible for all the meanderings of fate, but unless we make proposals, we externalize our idealisms, our visions, our dreams, even our nightmares. How are we to, you know, contribute to, you know, to life, to architecture, to culture? What is that horse doing there? I don't know, but it's an interesting picture. No, I don't know. What was going on here? Was there a strike, or they were working on renovating the building? Whatever. It's a good building, and I like this fact that you know, it shows the continuity of efforts, artistic efforts. Santelia, then some years later, Giuseppe Terragni, with the implication of a poet, Marinetti, and also one or two artists. Sorry for this, I couldn't find a better resolution for this section, but a tomb. 1932, we saw the Gualada Cemetery by Eric Miralles and Carmen Pinos. Now we'll see the two actually tombs done by or built by Giuseppe Terragni. This was the first one, and there is in close proximity a second one. Here he still uses the columns, you know, explicitly, but on the other hand, there is a certain level of modernity. Here is the second one he built. So he built these two. This one came a little bit later, and we are going to see a few other images with it. But in the meantime, before we arrive again in this cemetery and look at the second chapel, or I don't know, I shouldn't call it a chapel, a tomb, this is a very interesting work he did, and it's not, the images are not very clear, but in 1932, this architect, who is considered a rationalist, actually did a work which is almost Dadaist, or even has elements of deconstruction, of fragmentation. You'll see the Sala O della Mostra della Rivoluzione Fascista a Roma. And he was inspired by, you know, the Roman salute, and you see a picture on the left, and you see a few other pictures. It's not very clear. I couldn't find a plan, a section, but look at this interior, you know, 1930s. I mean, it is futurism here, yes, it is, but to call this rationalist, I wouldn't. So he was an architect who was more than just a so-called rationalist. To me, this seems obvious. I mean, look at this. This is almost Dada. mean, there is the level of abstraction and, you know, the visual non-conformism is obvious. Well, not in this poster, but I don't think he did this poster. I just found this poster and I thought of including it in the Mostra della Rivoluzione Fascista, which was a poster made for I wonder what those people felt, you know. I mean, you had sensitive people, you have artists, no? You had architects, you have poets, but you look at these figures, you know, and maybe in these stern figures, they saw some kind of a, encouragement to express their will. And I don't know, I'm trying to understand why, you know, humanists, because that's what they were, sympathized with fascism, meaning essentially with war. That's what we see here. This is at the entrance of his building. A view from the interior, another view from the interior, the exhibition. This is how the building looked from the outside. And look at this. I mean, it is there is a modern drama here. Yes, there is an arch here, but you know, this axis here, and there is a level of theatrics that is very modern. Giuseppe Terragni. I mean, look at the building here or here and look at his building. This shows clearly a quest for modernity. Look at the car here and then look at the building. It was a clear quest for the new. The albergo posta in Como, this is a little intervention, nothing, you know, just remodeling. Nothing dramatic, but still you look at the staircase and the parapet is simple, yes, but it has also through the color a certain level of inventiveness. Progetta per un villa, I don't know if I have pictures here. Yes, I do have this. It was not built, but it shows a very interesting plan, doesn't it? Would we call this a rationalist project? I don't know. I'm not so sure. I mean, why would this be rationalist and Villa Savoie not? Another tomb, the one that you already saw, is this one. He was an Italian, and you know, this arch is showing up in some of his works, almost unavoidably, perhaps. Now, this is maybe his most important work, Casa del Fascio in Como in 1932, 1936, which I had the chance to see with my own eyes. I went once to Como and I saw it. Here it is, splendidly. Now, this, you might say it's, but I don't know, what does ration? Yes, it is. It uses a grid, it has a regularity, it has a rhythm, but I don't know. But this is more, and actually the trees, I remember when I visited, I photographed very expressionistic trees in its proximity. We see something here, but not really expressionistic. And I reflected on the dialectics between the rationalism of the building and the drama of the trees. are these curves here truly rationalistic? I don't know. Are they? In certain details, he seemed to be able and willing to go beyond rationalism. Yes, from the outside, you would say yes. And there are such architectures being built at this very time. It stands out, no? I mean, the context was not conducive to something like this. And yet, and it's not just the building, look at also the platform on which it stands. It's abstract and you know, white and clean and so on. Did it express the certain purity that maybe these people aspire towards through the violence of war? I don't know. It perplexes me. Hitler also wanted a white architecture. White, no, but in order to arrive at that whiteness, you had to go through the redness of millions of people being dead and concentration camps and gas chambers and you name it, other horrors. Apparently, Hitler even gave a speech where he invited to more hatred, hatred and more hatred. Very sad. And yet he aspired towards whiteness. And we see here also a white building by Giuseppe Terragni for the fascist movement. The building doesn't need to have any kind of guilt. The building is not guilty. Architecture is not, a building is not a sinner. It doesn't sin. So Casa del Fascio in Como by Giuseppe Terragni, and an important so-called rationalist building. He received these important commissions when he was, you know, very young. Casa Rustici a Milano, 1933, 1935. He had several collaborations with Pietro Lingheri. You can tell now that this is a Giuseppe Terragni building, and there are actually two buildings with a common facade, kind of interesting. It's more interesting seen from this this side than from what we see here, but it's because of this rift, because of this open space in between the two sides of the building. It is clear to me that when you have openings, you know, separations, breaks, when you break the monolithic, you know, crystallization of a building, you have a chance for more variety and thus for more life. You know, it's an unusual view here because you would expect in the corner of a, you know, you have an intersection here between two avenues. You wouldn't expect to see this break here. You would expect to see a building that, you know, is not broken in the middle. So I think it's an unusual situation. In a way, it testifies about the truth of the two streets, but then contradicts the differences by uniting the two sides through these, you know, long balconies. Casa Toninello in Milan, 1933, done together with the same architect. This is not, in my opinion, a remarkable building, but anyway, they built a few things like Casa Ghiringhelli, also in Milan, 1933. This one also has some interesting things. Like here, you see this line is not totally continuous. I mean, it is continuous, but two different angles. So something is happening here. There's an incision with like an hesitation. There is the plans. These plans are not quite correct, or I didn't see this curve here. And maybe this was proposed and it was not realized quite like this. But this is what I was referring to, and this can be seen. Now, the presence of the arch in elevations and also kind of an arch in plan, to me, shows a little bit of hesitations here, as an hesitation between avant-garde tendencies, radical, and certain nostalgia, maybe for the Roman arch, for history, for historicism. I think this is actually a weakness, but you know, maybe I'm a little bit too harsh. I don't know. Now, these are some interventions, I think, by an artist in the present. I wasn't very sure, but I included the image, maybe an attempt to bring color a little bit into three different buildings by Terragni. Casa di Vacanze. This is also not very clear because I found images with the building being built, but here I see progetto non realizzato per la Triennale di Milano, or it was realized later, but not for the Triennale. This might be possible. Is this building for an artist? You see, there are books published. I mean, this is a book about just this very building, but there I see Triennale in Milano, so I'm a little bit confused. Was it built for the Triennale or not? It's not very clear. Well, the presence of art in the context of architecture is always adding something, and we don't do this these days too much, do we? Monumento a Roberto Sarfati is an interesting monument. I like it actually a lot because it is primal, it is archetypal, it is in a way mysterious and yet very simple. I think is an excellent contribution by Giuseppe Terragni to the art of architecture. So it's this massive, construction, and just a little, you see here a little picture. That's it, almost unnoticeable, The only narrative here is this little picture, but otherwise it is clear that this is a monument, is about eternity and the afterlife. It is one of his best works, I think. Now, Casa Lavezzari in Milan, 1934, also with Pietro Linghieri. Here we see the same thing, you know, a building in the corner, and you'll see the plan. I think he had a certain liking for the rift. You see the plan. In a way, it makes me think of that skyscraper in, well, not really a skyscraper, but that the less tall tower by Carmen Pinos in Guadalajara. Casa Rustici. There are two buildings with the same name, but this one is with Comoli. Uh, what can we say? This is at the first sight you would say, well, another modernistic building. Is actually not just this, but the whole of it is. You know, these two belong to the same ensemble that Giuseppe Terragni built. And again, the rift, you know, the break here in the center, you know, an attempt to sabotage the monolithic, you know, I call it crystallization of the building. It's the negation in a way, and that negation has a role itself. This is a villa he built for this floricoltore Bianchi. Uh, it's an interesting modernistic building. I mean, it was built in 1935, so you know, 86 years ago or so. Essentially a box on pilotis, but these pilotis are not round like Villa Savoie, but square. 1935, but we see the three cars now. It might be that these plans were not drawn by uh, Terrani, but you know, they seem to have. I mean, the graphics seem to belong to our time. Another public work, you know, like a sports arena. He built several of these. Palazzo Terrani in Lisone. This is a building, I don't know why it is called the Palazzo Terrani. Maybe the name was given, you know, using the name of the architect. He built a lot until 39 when he died. This again intrigues me that Mussolini commissioned himself and through his, helpers, young architects of a rather unconventional turn of mind, or belonging to the avant-garde. Often the authoritarian figures don't do this, but it seems Mussolini had a taste for the aesthetical adventure. Villa Bianca, Seveso. I don't know exactly what is going on here. I'm not a functionalist, but why is this extending like this, that? But this useless thing is actually maybe the most interesting thing about the building, isn't it? It shows again that the exuberance that or the exaltation that the building should kind of point towards is important. Yes, the strict functionalist would say we have to cut it here. But truly, this unnecessary thing here, this extension, is maybe the most interesting thing about the whole building. I wonder how the building would have been if this was cut here. I don't think it would have had the same spirit. It's this betrayal here, it's otherwise the building is, what can we say, modernistic building, but with this gesture here, the building is breaking the rule. And it's important to break the rules, of course. They say the rules, that's what the rules are made for, to be broken. Asilo Santelia, again, the name of Santelia, it was built, the building by Terragni, but the name was given using the name of the great architect who died at 28, Antonio Santelia. And we see the difference between this building and what is behind, right? It's clearly an infusion of modernity here. This is what, and in a way, I look at this picture and I keep reflecting on the role of education. Education should be just like this building, looking forward and pulling life and the market, so to speak, through its innovations and its forward-looking mentality. Unfortunately, in some parts of the world, is the opposite. They pull education behind, but no, education should be at the forefront. That's what I think, and this because it is about knowledge and is about creativity. Here you have the avant-garde, and then you have the society, coming at a slower pace behind. But when they decide, and this remains in the back, when the forefront or the avant-garde becomes an arrière-garde, then I don't know. Although the arrière-garde has some value as well. And I even thought, by the way, of the avant-garde of what I might call the peri-garde. In other words, an avant-garde which is also on the sides, because the avant-garde refers only to a front. But what about the sides? That's why I thought that maybe we could also reflect on a possible peri-garde from periphery, that is. So all around, at the front, in the back, on the left and on the right, if we are to use the square paradigm. Now, what is the role of this? You could say again, the functionalist would say, wait a minute, what is this? Well, again, I don't think we have to justify and explain everything casually or on a causal, I don't know if there is such a word, manner. capriciousness is part of the artistic gesture, and architectonic too. Maybe not to a large extent, but it should be acknowledged. Another Casa Pedralio in Como, but I didn't find pictures. Casa and an apartment, Giuliani Frigerio a Como. We are approaching the end of this presentation, but not before I show the project for Dante, for this writer who is so important for Italian culture, and not just the Italian culture. There are books, of course, published about several projects buildings by Giuseppe Terragni. This kind of trees I saw in the proximity of Casa del Fascio in Como. I don't know, I don't have knowledge about trees. I don't know what kind of tree it was, but I know they moved me very much with their, agitated, with their agitated branches and so on. The Danteum Roma. Now we end the presentation on Giuseppe Terragni. I have to confess, I didn't study the project. I did it, I looked more carefully a few years ago, and I forgot the intricacies. I invite the students, the 2,000 students who are present here, to study this project, because I think is a very interesting project that shows the potentialities of a metaphysical architecture, something that we neglect. There is a metaphysical painting, like Giorgio de Chirico was considered, at least in his early works, as a metaphysical poet, a metaphysical painter, but we don't have too much concern with what might be a metaphysical architecture. So the Danteum project, the Danteum is an unbuilt architecture designed by Giuseppe Terragni and Pietro Linghieri. Sketches and drawings of the master give us the unfulfilled dream of Terragni for a monument to Dante, in which the Divine Comedy was projected in an architectural scheme. And we see some renderings. This would be the plan. In order to truly understand it, you have to read the Divine Comedy and read the descriptions connecting. But what I see here as a layman, as someone who didn't study the project, I see a spatial configuration which does not follow the usual path. I mean, look here what's going on with these columns of various sizes. The golden ratio, a column in each little, square, and it's something interesting going on here. Also, this forest of columns here, which I think were made to be either made of glass. We are going to see some pictures of this. So it is a, at the first, superficial actually reading of the plan, it's a quest towards what I call a metaphysical architecture. Very pure, the purest form of architecture actually. And it's something we don't do. We don't do almost at all these days. How are we going to recuperate memory, and how to recuperate the significance of a lived life like Dante's life, unless we assume levels of narratives, and we don't do that. You know, in a way, what I try to do with these presentations, but also through the competitions I launch, A House For, is exactly about this. Is about reconnecting with cultural important moments and try to find architectural reflections into the present. I mean, this is a very pure plan. You know, it's really about the in a way the essence of what architecture could be when it says goodbye to all the prosaic obsessions. But the language is resolutely modern. The Danteum, I like even the name, the Danteum. This was actually commissioned by Mussolini. He didn't do it just because he felt like doing it, you know. And again, it shows an interesting political figure who obviously was foolish in many respects, but he had an interest in creative architecture. So I encourage both myself and you to look more closely to this project, and you can find a lot of information on the web. Even if it was not built, I think for the thought is important. What exactly he wanted to do there. I will end this presentation with 3 images from done in the present, kind of continuing the work of Terragni, also at the level of project. You see the glass columns, the forest of glass columns. Those symbolism I could speculate about, but I would rather abstain from doing it because I could be wrong. But the idea is interesting. And look at these distortions that come from, you know, reflections. And then the very idea of a glass column, you know, a column is supposed to be a support, no, to have a structural raison d'etre. If it is made of glass, it problematizes everything. It becomes almost its own negation. So I think I didn't read what Terragni wanted to do, but there are interesting things going on here. So now I end this presentation on Giuseppe Terragni with these images which were not done by him, but by some people in the present, that connecting the work of Terragni with what they wanted to do, the Danteum project, the Inferno. Are we reflecting on the Inferno in our works? I don't think we are, but maybe we should. Are we reflecting on the meaning of the Purgatorio? We don't, but maybe we should. I think our divorce from metaphysical concerns is tragic because we reduce life to really something very, very banal. Are we reflecting on the Paradiso? I don't think we do. But here is an image of the Paradiso referring to the work by Dante Alighieri, by these architects in the present, who invite us, I think, to assume other dimensions of architecture and life.